Hello and welcome to this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today is Mike Gagne. He is the Interim Chief Financial Officer for the City of New Bedford. That's been a long interim too, you know.
Yeah, I've been there since June of 2021.
So for folks who don't know you, I mean, you've got a background where you've worked in surrounding towns and done this sort of job for a long time.
Yeah. I worked in Dartmouth as town administrator for 28 years, and then I went over to Mattapoisett, and I was town administrator and chief financial officer for another 12 years.
And so this is retirement for you.
I actually did. I retired in 2019, but for various reasons, including the pandemic, I've been filling in different places, including the city. So I enjoy local government work.
And to tease Mike too, my first job coming out of school back in college when I was 23 was as a cub reporter, and I covered Dartmouth.
Right.
And he just started really as town administrator there.
Yeah,
so,
I started in '81.
Yeah. So so it's been funny to see you when you get appointed.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about a couple of things. First, though, the budget process.
Sure.
It's the new year. The budget process has started.
Yeah.
Don't want to delve too deeply because the budget's still a work in progress right now. We just started it.
Right.
But I think people would be curious to know, what is the process? How does the city go about figuring out finances for the next fiscal year, which will begin July 1st?
Sure. So what we do is we start just after the first of the year. We send out what the parameters are going to be on the budget, what we need to see from each of the departments as far as what they predict in revenue, amounts that will be raised through various fees and the tax levy. And then we ask them to project their expenses, both salary and operational expenses. And we look to, at that point, to see how the revenue picture is developing, because there's really 5 components that generally make up the budget. You have what you raise on the tax levy under Proposition 2.5.
Which comes out in December is when the council approves it.
Right. And then we have under state statute what they call cherry sheet aid, which includes unrestricted general government aid, various number of small categories, but the principal amount is what they refer to as Chapter 70 school aid. The governor's budget number comes out generally about the 3rd week of January, and then the House, the Massachusetts House, the Senate, and then the conference committee will work on it. So you get your final number sometime close to July. Then you have a combination of what they call local receipts, the various permits and everything that you gather, through the different departments over the fiscal year, and then you got some smaller categories. But that's principally, where all of the money comes to, run the operation.
Do you have an idea of what the number is for your budget before departments do there? I mean, do you have a ballpark as to what the money is, I guess?
Sure. Ari Sky, former chief financial officer, did an excellent job on his revenue forecasting. We have a 5-year revenue forecast and expenditure forecast plan. You generally have good historical data as to where those categories go up in the previous 5 years, so you can do some pretty good trending. But you also have the issue of what may be the effect of the pandemic on your revenues. And that has hit the city in other cities and towns in Massachusetts where the revenues took a hit. But they have forecasting models. Yep.
So as you mentioned, all the departments, including here at Cable Access, we go through the budget process with you and your staff, which is always great. And then there's a process as well. I mean, you're talking to the counselors.
Sure.
You're talking to each department head, trying to justify. I don't think people grasp too that really, when we first meet, I mean, there's always level fund the budget. It's really the mantra is do more with less in the city.
And, you know, for various reasons where certain fixed expenses rise irregardless of what the year is, in your pension assessments, your health insurance costs, things like that, where there's, you know, a fixed percentage in a relatively substantial cost center. Unfortunately, you have to generally adhere to a level funded budget until the revenue picture flushes out a little bit more clearly, you know, both on the state level and, you know, on the local level. So what happens is ultimately the chief financial officer in the department will put together a budget for the mayor to review. The mayor reviews it, makes additions, deletions, and considerations on what is called potential enhancements, which are basically things that maybe a department needs, but it's going to need more money than the level funded budget. So what happens is the mayor then develops the budget that is acceptable that he submits to the city council.
The one thing too that I don't think that people grasp too is the reality is there's not the percentage of the budget that really you can control is very small. It's like 25%. Everything else is pretty much fixed costs.
Yeah, Jim, you're pretty much on the target, because when you have the minimum net school spending requirement, you got the pensions, you got health insurance, you got your various general insurances, things of those nature. It really comes down to a small amount that you really have much discretion in.
So when people say, well, you know, can you control that other stuff? I mean, and just use health insurance for an example. I mean, the city does competitive bidding to try to get the best insurance rate, but I mean, there's really, health insurance is going to go up in general.
Yeah, and historical data in Massachusetts that has been averaged over the last 20 years, health insurance averages a 5% increase per year. And when you pay what cities and towns in Massachusetts pay in health insurance, you know, a 5% increase is substantial. There are years, maybe it has been 1 or 2, but I've seen years where it's been 8 or 9% also.
Wow.
And that's a significant amount of money to raise over the previous year.
And talk about school spending too, because there is, I mean, you have to have net school spending.
Correct.
There's a minimum. You have to hit your target.
Correct.
And the city, I know, you know, education's of huge importance to the mayor, so you want to try to spend more.
You do. It's there is a formula, as you said, the minimum net school spending. The Commonwealth, through the governor and legislative annual budgets, has been very good to the city. They recognize, you know, based upon the economics of the city, relative to its population and things, they've been very good in the Chapter 70 aid that they have provided. So I, you know, certainly thankful, you know, to the legislative delegation and the governor for, you know, taking cognizance of that.
When they say that revenue is good for the state, it's better than expected, does that translate to the city or to communities?
It does. Both the governor and the lieutenant governor in their presentation to the Mass Municipal Association did highlight how revenue collections have been improved in the state, even during the pandemic, and they are looking at different ways that they're going to then disperse that revenue. Not always in the form of state aid, but they're talking about additional money for Chapter 90 for the roads. They're talking about some additional money to help cities like New Bedford, you know, during the pandemic with COVID-related costs, things like that. Yep.
So when you're developing the budget along with the department heads, you're looking at funding items, I guess, line items that the state will fund. I guess you don't want to duplicate what they're doing. Is that a fair statement?
The Chapter 78, which is probably I would say close to 75% of the state aid, has to go to education.
Oh, okay.
The other 25% is for some different categories. Like they call out library aid, they call out aid to veterans, aid to widows and veterans through abatements. And there are some specific calls, but the biggest category other than school aid is what they call unrestricted general government aid. And that basically can be used for any city or town expenses.
When you look at the overall financial picture of the city, what would you tell the residents? I mean, it seems good, I would assume.
It is, and it's, in my opinion, the limited time that I have been here, I feel it's good. And I feel it's good because you have an excellent financial team there. The work that Ari Sky did for the last 8 years, and the chief financial officers, the people they've had in that department, the people in the treasurer and the collector's office, and auditor's office, all of them are excellent. Probably some of the best skilled individuals that I've seen in the finances in a group. City's very lucky, so it's well managed. That's why the city wins these awards from the general governmental finance.
Just announced.
Yeah, they received for what they call for a comprehensive accounting and financial report. They 1 out of 1,000 towns and cities in the United States. New Bedford got that this year. They have 6 years now received an award from the Governmental Finance Officers Association for distinguished budgeting procedures and setting departments by certain goals and objectives and metrics of accomplishment of the services that they had to provide. So it's a very, very well managed operation. I give a lot of credit to the city.
How important is it? Because people, again, you don't hear about good finances. It's not good TV, it's not sexy, it's not in the paper, but how important is that? Because you do see communities that are having financial issues across the state.
Sure. It's extremely important because the city carries for wastewater and water improvements and infrastructure improvements, what they call bond indebtedness. And every time you go to the market, for large capital projects, you have to do a financial statement update or a full financial statement. All of those factors are considered under the Standard & Poor's evaluation process. Probably 6-7 years ago, Standard & Poor's developed a more comprehensive, full picture of the community. Before it was basically a numbers sort of evaluation. Now they look at the economics. They spend quite a bit of time talking about what things have improved in the city as far as new industry. They'll be asking us when we go to the bond market in a month or so, where we stand with the offshore wind projects. They want to know employment statistics, statistics of the population. They rate the community on financial management, what the financial management team is, what's been the accomplishment of the team. So it's much better, and I think Standard & Poor's deserves a lot of credit for bringing it and being more comprehensive.
Give people sort of a timeline as to how the budget plays out as far as scheduling goes. I know that a lot of people, obviously for them, they'll see the council meetings in June, late May and June, when the department heads go.
Sure.
But obviously things are done way before that.
Oh yeah, there's quite a bit of work because once those budgets are submitted, our office and our team will then have meetings with those department heads, go over the budgets with them, what the enhancements are, what are the justification for certain items, how are things going as far as meeting the metrics that have been set for that department, and how will the new budget improve or continue to provide those services. It's crunch time, as they would say.
Right, and the mayor, I think, presents it sometime in March?
I think it's a little late. I would say in April, generally. And the mayor has to have adequate time to look over the recommendations also. So then we go into each of the departments, meeting with the city council having a chance, having reviewed the document, ask questions. And then what happens is right around, I would say the first week in June, then generally that's when the vote is taken by the city council as to what the overall budget will be.
And for people who don't know too, the budget is online. You
Yes.
have an opportunity as a resident to see the entire
Yep.
city budget at any time.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. They post up the final FY22 budget. It's on the city's webpage. You can actually view the process on, I believe it's channel 18 here.
mhm.
You can view the process. All of the finance committee meetings are covered by the cable access, and then the final deliberations by the full council are also covered.
Before we depart, I wanted to ask you, because we wanted to talk about the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan funds.
Sure.
That I know obviously the White House approved in last year.
Yep.
It's on the council agenda right now. For people who don't know, what are ARPA funds?
ARPA funds are funds that have been appropriated for the purpose of mitigating fiscal impacts due to COVID. The linkage is specifically, in a very summary sort of fashion, is if there are things within the city, both in the public sector and in the governmental sectors, nonprofit sectors, then you can use ARPA funds for the purposes of helping to mitigate or bring back to what levels they were prior to the pandemic. And that can cover a lot of different areas. It covers the area certainly of the city's services, numerous services such as public health and emergency medical services and the police and the fire and other social services have had to ramp up, during this pandemic period. And those funds are there to help with that. It is also there to help the city in what they call the revenue loss calculation, and that is when fees and collections for various permits and things, took a dive because there wasn't anything happening in particular areas. We'll take as an example downtown parking. People were just not going out, so downtown parking revenues were off, and that money is there, to help, affected entities like that. And then the last category gives more broad latitude to the city in the use of the funds for certain utility improvements, wastewater, water, stormwater improvements, and also they've included the issue of broadband and the development of a robust broadband network so that people in the city, everybody in the city, and the industries and the commercial entities can have good quality access to broadband services.
So the city's earmarked to get roughly, what, 60 million?
City gets directly to them $63 million. There's another $18 million that comes
From the county.
through Bristol County.
So the city held public hearings, which we recorded and broadcast and what have you. In theory, though, nothing's happened yet. So they know that they've got the city gets the money, but it's a process, in other words, before things happen. And I don't think people understand that either. It's not just, oh, here's the money, spend it.
Sure. What they did initially, and I thought they got some very good ideas, is they set up an online portal on the city's webpage whereby people could give input, reaction, and ideas on what they felt, were needs, for ARPA, use of ARPA funds. Once those were, in fact, done, that data was comprised into an evaluation so that the mayor had direction on what the community as a whole felt was necessary. The mayor put together, I think it was probably about a 10-page document, which outlined what, based upon the input he had from councilors and from the public and through the public hearings, put together a plan as to what the allocation would be in probably a dozen different categories.
And they're generic. I mean, there's no specific things that
it's
shown.
It talks to what are the eligibility areas.
Right.
And that was furnished to the council, and the council has had a couple of meetings. I've been in attendance where they've talked about what they see, what they think some of the priorities are. And right now, what has happened is that some council members have gotten back and reacted to the allocations, and the new finance committee council president, Brad Markey, has convened a meeting for a week from yesterday. I think it's the 17th of this month, and there's going to be further discussion with all of the parties, and hopefully what will then happen is at the next council meeting, which I believe is the 24th of February, the issue can be taken up.
Is it important time-wise that things have to be accepted and approved and everything? I mean, it's because the money doesn't have to be spent or earmarked, I guess, for a while.
What's important is the timelines, that all of the commitments for the funds that you have available have to be made and in place by the 31st of December of 2024. The city then has an additional 2 more years for those commitments to be executed, projects to be closed out, and by December the 31st of 2026, it's done, the books are closed. So the commitments have to be made by the 2024 December, and then closed out 2026 December.
All right. Yeah. It's good seeing you. It's been
you,
a busy
Jim.
time. If people have questions,
Sure.
what's the best thing? I
Best
mean, I know
thing
your
is-
email is always.
Yeah, go right to the Chief Financial Officer's department link on the city webpage, and click on, and you can send me a question or a comment or idea, and we'll look at it.
Sounds good. It's good seeing you.
Nice seeing you, Jim.
That's going to do it for this edition of City Hall Insider. I'm Jim Marshall. My thanks to Mike Gagne. We will see you again soon.